It was supposed to be a fun girls' trip to Napa Valley. We were celebrating Sarah's 40th birthday, and I thought a few days of wine tasting and relaxation would be the perfect escape. And then I came home early and heard my husband say our marriage was a nightmare. I should have known something was wrong, but I was so blind. I'll never forget what happened next. Hi everyone, my name is Natalie, and I'm still trying to process everything that's happened. It feels like my whole life has been turned upside down. If you're listening, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Comment below and tell me where you're listening to this story. It helps to know I'm not alone. The truth is, before that trip, I thought Connor and I were happy. We'd been married for 7 years, and while things weren't always perfect, we were comfortable. We had a beautiful house in the suburbs, 2 lovely dogs, and a life that, from the outside, looked idyllic. But the reality was far from it. I remember landing at the airport after just 2 days away. Sarah had come down with a terrible flu, and the rest of us decided to cut the trip short rather than risk getting sick ourselves. I texted Connor to let him know I was on my way home, but he didn't reply. I figured he was probably busy with work, so I didn't think much of it. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. The dogs weren't barking, and the lights were off. I called out Connor's name, but there was no answer. I assumed he was out running errands or maybe at the gym. I decided to surprise him by starting dinner. I was unpacking my suitcase in the bedroom when I heard voices coming from downstairs. It sounded like Connor was on the phone. I paused, half expecting him to be on a work call, but the tone of his voice was different, softer, more intimate. Curiosity piqued. I crept towards the top of the stairs, careful not to make a sound. I know, Connor was saying, his voice low and urgent. It's a nightmare, honestly. 7 years and it feels like a lifetime. My heart stopped. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Who was he talking to? And what did he mean? A nightmare. No, I'm not going anywhere, he continued. Not yet, anyway. You know I'm only doing this for the money. Her family has more than they know what to do with. Each word felt like a shard of glass piercing my heart. My own husband, the man I had built a life with, was admitting that he was only with me for my family's wealth. It was a cruel and devastating blow.
I wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there. But something stopped me. A strange sense of calm washed over me, and I realized that I couldn't let him know I had heard him. Not yet. I needed to gather information to understand the full extent of his deception. Quietly, I retreated back to the bedroom, my mind racing. I replayed his words in my head, searching for any clues, any hints that I had missed along the way. Had I been so blind, so naive, that I hadn't seen the truth staring me in the face? I decided to pretend that I hadn't heard anything. I went downstairs and greeted Connor with a smile, as if everything was normal. He seemed surprised to see me, but quickly composed himself. "Hey, honey. You're back early," he said, giving me a quick kiss. "How was the trip?" "It was good, but Sarah got sick, so we all decided to come home," I replied casually. "I thought I'd surprise you," he chuckled nervously. "Well, you certainly did." I busied myself in the kitchen, trying to act normal, while inside my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I made small talk with Connor as we ate dinner, all the while observing him closely, searching for any telltale signs of guilt or deceit. Over the next few weeks, I became a covert investigator in my own home. I started paying closer attention to Connor's behavior, noticing things I had previously overlooked. He was always on his phone, constantly texting and taking calls in private. He became more distant, less affectionate. I started digging into our finances, scrutinizing every transaction, every statement, and that's when I found it. Discrepancies. Large sums of money being withdrawn from our joint account with no explanation. Payments to companies I had never heard of. It was clear that Connor was hiding something, and I was determined to find out what it was. One evening, while Connor was in the shower, I decided to take a risk. I knew it was a violation of his privacy, but I felt like I had no other choice. I picked up his phone and tried his password. It was my birthday. It unlocked. I quickly began scrolling through his messages and emails. I found a hidden folder filled with photos and messages from another woman. Her name was Denise. The messages were explicit, intimate. It was clear that Connor had been having an affair. My stomach churned with disgust and betrayal. How could he do this to me? I also found emails detailing his plans to leave me, to take as much money as possible in the process. He had been meticulously planning his escape, waiting for the right moment to strike. I felt a surge of anger, a burning desire for revenge, but I knew I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I needed to be smart, to outmaneuver him at his own game. I started documenting everything, taking screenshots of the messages, copying the financial records. I knew I would need evidence if I wanted to protect myself. I also started taking steps to secure my own finances. I opened a separate bank account, transferring as much money as I could without raising suspicion. I consulted with a lawyer, explaining my situation and seeking advice on how to proceed. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Elizabeth, listened patiently as I recounted my story. She assured me that I had a strong case and that she would do everything in her power to protect my interests. The key is to remain calm and collected, Elizabeth advised. Don't let him know that you're on to him. The more information we have, the better. Following Elizabeth's advice, I continued to play the role of the unsuspecting wife. I acted as if everything was normal, all the while gathering evidence and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. I started subtly planting seeds of doubt in Connor's mind. I would make vague references to the future, hinting that I was considering making some changes in my life. I wanted to make him nervous, to make him wonder if I was catching on to his plan. One evening, I suggested that we have dinner with my parents. Connor's face paled. He knew that my parents were very protective of me, and that they would not hesitate to defend me if they thought I was being wronged. I don't know, Natalie, he said nervously. I'm really busy with work right now. Maybe we can reschedule? It's important to me, Connor, I replied firmly. I want them to know that we're doing well.
He reluctantly agreed, but I could tell that he was uneasy. He knew that the clock was ticking, and that his carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. The dinner with my parents was excruciating. Connor was on edge the entire time, trying to maintain his charade of being the loving and devoted husband, but I could see the fear in his eyes, the desperation to keep his secret hidden. As the evening wore on, I decided that it was time to make my move. I waited until we were alone, just the two of us, before dropping the bomb. Connor, I said softly, I know everything. His face drained of color. He stared at me in disbelief, his eyes wide with panic. What are you talking about? He stammered. I know about Denise, I continued, my voice unwavering.
I know about the money you've been stealing, and I know that you've been lying to me for years. He tried to deny it, to weasel his way out of it, but I wouldn't let him. I presented him with the evidence I had gathered, the messages, the financial records, the proof of his betrayal. He was speechless. He knew that he had been caught, that there was no escape. How did you find out? He finally managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. It doesn't matter, I replied coldly. What matters is that it's over. I want a divorce. The look on his face was priceless. He had been so confident, so arrogant, thinking that he could manipulate me and get away with it. But I had outsmarted him, exposed his lies, and taken back my power. The divorce process was messy and contentious. Connor fought me every step of the way, trying to deny his wrongdoing and cling to his ill-gotten gains. But Elizabeth was relentless, presenting the evidence to the court and exposing Connor's lies for all to see. In the end, I won. The judge ruled in my favour, awarding me a significant portion of our assets and ordering Connor to pay back the money he had stolen. Connor's life began to unravel. His reputation was ruined, his friends and family turned their backs on him, and he was left with nothing but the consequences of his actions. I cut ties with Connor's family, most of whom had been complicit in his deception. Some of them reached out to apologise, claiming that they had no idea what Connor was up to, but I didn't believe them. They had all benefited from his lies, and I wanted nothing to do with them. I moved out of the house we had shared, finding a small apartment in the city. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my life on my own terms. I started going to therapy, working through the emotional trauma of Connor's betrayal. It was a long and difficult process, but I knew that it was necessary for my healing. I leaned on my family and friends for support, finding strength in their love and encouragement. They reminded me of who I was, of what I was capable of, and helped me to see that I deserved better. As I began to heal, I discovered a newfound sense of independence and self-reliance. I realized that I didn't need a man to define me, to make me happy. I was strong, I was capable, and I was in control of my own destiny. One day, I received a message from a mutual friend telling me that Connor had been sending money to Denise throughout our marriage. It was the final confirmation of his deceitful nature, the last piece of the puzzle falling into place. I felt a surge of relief, a sense of closure.
I had been right all along. Connor had never loved me. He had only been using me. And now he was paying the price. I learned that Connor had started dating someone new, a younger woman who seemed to be as shallow and materialistic as he was. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity for her. She had no idea what she was getting into. I used my divorce settlement to pay off my debts, to invest in my future. I started taking classes, pursuing my passions, and exploring new opportunities. I was finally living my life on my own terms, without the burden of Connor's lies and deceit. It was a long and painful journey, but I had emerged stronger and wiser. I had learned valuable lessons about trust, betrayal, and the importance of self-love. I had survived the storm, and I was ready to embrace the sunshine.
I realized that Connor's actions were a reflection of his own insecurities and shortcomings, not of my worth. He was a manipulator, a liar, and a user. And I was better off without him. I had finally found peace, knowing that I had done everything I could to protect myself and my future. I had taken back my power, and I was ready to move on, to create a life filled with love, joy, and authenticity. And that's when I realized that sometimes the most devastating betrayals can lead to the greatest transformations. Some people try to tear you down, but you can always rebuild yourself and create a better life than before. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.